Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Woodward Tigers here at woodwardsports.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Chris Brown, Uper, and John. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and of course at woodwardsports.com. And I wanted to pass along a congratulations to my podcast partner of 6 years. Is it 6 years now, Chris? Six, seven? I don't know. 5 years?
I
Five?
don't know. We'd have to go back and find. I think the first couple episodes I was a guest. I saw some scissors in the background.
Yeah, that was my wife there. So Chris is now officially part of the Woodward staff. So he'll be writing and editing and all that jazz. So Chris is going to be with us going. Yeah, and John is kind of moving into producing and all that stuff. So John is kind of the
making my way.
Yeah, so he's officially the producer of the show. So he is. If it wasn't for him today, because of the day I had, I literally went from being in the Woodward Studios at 9:00, then going to the game. The Tigers game was a 3-hour game. Then I got stuck in traffic because getting out of downtown at that hour was insane. And they have 94 closed off in 3 different directions going that way. And
3 different directions.
Yeah, like so if you go to go on the 75, it was just a log jam of cars. Then you try to go down Grand River, with the Lodge to Grand River. So I'm like, okay, cool. I'll get on the Lodge. Lodge 94th blocked. You go do the turnaround, that is blocked. So then I took a series of side streets just to get 1094. So good evening, Christopher. Join us on YouTube chat. So if you're joining us on YouTube chat, welcome aboard and plenty to get talked to today. We're now 7-1 in the Scott Harris era of Tiger baseball.
Ooh, sounds good, man.
Yeah. So, plenty to get to. We're going to talk about the series. We're going to have. We're going to do a second base power rankings for next year. So, who could be the starting baseman for the Tigers? So, I like the idea. Of course, the Eastern League Championship Series, and we're going to get into a little bit of the whole. I mean, the Twins are coming to town, so we're going to definitely dwell on the Twins and kick the Twins while they're down a little bit. And so plenty to get to. Let's start with the Tigers and World Series. The Tigers sweep Kansas City, and I think in a dominant fashion. But I really think I think the Royals have kind of waved the white flag a little bit heading into this series. They're now tied for 4th place. Of course, Dayton Moore was fired last time, but on the 21st, he was fired. I think last time the day last time, but either way, he was just fired, and it's a team that's a little bit in turmoil. You thought that in terms of pitching, they would be a little better off than Tigers. I thought they were based off that, but they haven't been able. And Chrissy highlighted this a couple times. Able to develop pitching whatsoever, and just even today, sitting in the press box, some of the Royals media people just were. They're 10-14 in the month of September, and I think it was in the last coming into this game, they were kind of limping in. So, but the Tigers whooped on them, and it was nice to see that. And even with the whooping, the Tigers has a couple injuries. Willie Castro with the left hamstring pull, so now they're going to look at possibly going back to AAA. AJ Hinch mentioned today, because Matt Manning's on the IL for the rest of the season, so he's about the rest of the year, that they called up Miguel Diaz, who was with the team earlier in the spring. But as far as starters go, you mentioned Brian Garcia as a possibility, and also Elvin Rodriguez are down in Toledo, so as kind of the backup guys to start potentially. So as far as the infield goes, you have Brendan Davis. There's a couple of different people. Zach Short they could bring up. So Toledo season ended yesterday. Erie's season ended as well. But gentlemen, I'll start with you, Uper. What was a couple of thoughts of the Tigers series against the hapless Royals?
Yeah, I kind of agree. The Royals just have that sense of mailing it in, and even here, I'm blacked out on MLB TV, but I am able to get the Royals broadcast. So listening to Rex Hudler, he was even kind of down in the mouth a bit from where he usually is. He's usually a pretty upbeat guy. And you can just kind of see the Royals lineup hasn't taken that step forward that I think they thought might happen this year with the addition of Bobby Witt and some of the younger guys. That young juice just hasn't translated to wins and runs yet. Last night, for instance, when the Tigers threw that bullpen game at them, they had a ton of runners. They just couldn't get that big hit to open the game up. And Detroit was able to hang on. I think they stranded 13 guys. And they weren't taking great at-bats, in key situations. So I think that's a hallmark of a losing team sometimes. The Tigers played well, though. Give them credit. Defensively made some plays. The timely hitting, if you want to buy into timely hitting, they had some of that. So it was a fun week. It's always good to beat the Royals. They're in division, and they're going to have to stay ahead of them over the next few years.
Oh yeah. The offense was a lot better. I feel like this week, Jonathan Scope, he's finally started to hit a little bit. Obviously, Miggy had a good day yesterday, and Javi Baez has continued to hit as well. And obviously, the bullpen has been fantastic all season, and they were great in that bullpen game yesterday. So not really any bad from the series other than Torkelson has kind of scuffled over the last couple of games, but everything else seems to be going pretty well for the Tigers right now.
Yeah, to me, it's one of those things where the first two games are really close. Tigers came back really late in game one and then won in extras on a couple of Harold Castro hits, I believe. And then, won a close one yesterday, and then today was just kind of a blowout, which was, the Tigers had technically their ace on the mound, right? And the Royals are struggling to find anybody to pitch. And yeah, it's weird, as for as bad as the Tiger season has been, and the fact, like both teams have, fired their GMs this year, but somehow it feels like the Tigers are now ahead of the Royals in the rebuilding. And I'm not entirely sure why. It just feels like that. Maybe it's just the short-term winning this series. But, yeah, the Royals just seem like they've cashed it in for the rest of the year.
And speaking of Harold Castro, by the way, there was a couple interesting tidbits that came out of the series, and I think it was a little more exaggerated than anything else, that because he hasn't talked to the media since early spring, and then he cleared up. He's just like, yeah, everything's good. And so there's a couple of people, fans out there, that was kind of like, well, maybe he doesn't want to talk to the media. Maybe he's shy. I don't know. And he does speak English. I mean, it's not one of those things. It's not a translation thing. So I don't know. I think it was a big to do for nothing, really.
So Harold Castro hasn't talked to the media?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You could have fooled me. Like I have no idea. So a lot of people in the media love Harold Castro. It seems like, and I'm not dying to hear what Harold Castro has to say anyway. I mean, not to be mean, but like.
No, I know what you mean though. Yeah.
Going back to the Royals real quick. Are you guys interested that, we talked, how many times on this podcast did we wonder if the Tigers would stay in-house, for the GM role? And sure enough, the Royals did. By getting rid of Moore and going with JJ Piccolo, he's been the assistant there for a long time, and he's been rumored to get other jobs, never did. And it really was interesting how some of the Royals journalists, I thought, were really trying to find ways of how this is going to be different, what's going to change. Does Piccolo believe in a few things that Dayton Moore would never embrace? So that's going to be, the Tigers and the Royals have kind of diverged a bit in how they've approached these firings. So it'll be interesting to see how that rolls.
Yeah, and especially for a guy like JJ Piccolo, I mean, to me, it just seems like if you're gonna deviate from something different, you should, because if you look at the track record of who they developed, it's all he has been there with Dayton Moore the entire time. So since 2006. So I just think to myself, he's gonna what is gonna you said what is gonna change in reality? I mean, he comes from the Braves too. He comes from that. He was director of minor league operations for the Braves, and so he's got that history of scouting, and maybe he's a little more. How do I say this? Maybe he strikes better in the international market. I don't know. But there's nothing really. I don't know. I thought the Royals are kind of limited on budget what they can spend anyways. They always kind of do the same thing. They kind of go, okay, we like this bargain bin special, and they kind of go with that. So if they're limited on budget, then I don't see this. I don't see this working out really.
You know, the Dayton Moore era is one of the more fascinating general manager eras I can think of. He started in 2006 and was basically bad for 14 years and had three kind of good seasons. And in the way that they built that team and the way that they won, and they won the title in ways that still kind of confuse me, nobody has ever tried to replicate that because it's not a way that you actually win anymore. Like they won with defense in a bullpen.
Contact hitting.
Yeah, and it just kind of, it all came together for them in those middle years in 2014 and 2015. And it was, I've always talked about, like, the way they won, it kind of reminds me of the way NBA teams used to win back in the 80s, where you'd come there, you get to the finals and you lose in the final game, and then the next year it was your turn. And you don't see that in baseball. Teams flash for 1 year and then disappear the next. They don't come back. And so you got to give them credit for that. But yeah, they had that 2-year run and that was it. And they've been kind of a disaster ever since, and they were a disaster before that. So it is, I understand, once you win the title, you kind of have to keep the guy, right? But yeah, I mean, I bet they wish they would have parted ways about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, and even you mentioned this too. It's like, when does the honeymoon period end? When is after a team or GM wins the World Series? Because in some cases it's a lifetime. In some cases, I'm not saying. I think of the in terms of, for example, the Tigers after '84. I mean, Bill Joyce. He was there for another 6 years, but that was also, he left on his own terms, and there was changing in management and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if their hitting talent comes to fruition, because they do have some power. Like MJ Menendez, who had a home run, who had a blast earlier. He's not in for average right now, but Bobby Witt Jr. is definitely a legitimate guy out there. But Salvador Perez, I feel like he's 35. He's only 32. Doesn't he feel like he's been there for a long time?
He's the last one.
Just imagine
last one standing from that team, the World Series team.
I believe it.
Yeah. And the rest of the outfield right now, after Terry left, is essentially a hodgepodge. I'd rather have the Tigers' outfield's much better. I mean, their outfield after he left was a joke. It's not been. I'm sorry, not a joke, but just not. It's not good. But it's just. But then again, like the rotation, you have two guys in your rotation that has an ERA over 5. No thanks. So
Brady Singer. Down the stretch has been pretty good.
Yeah, but I mean, that's really about it, though. Everything else has been kind of a hodgepodge. So let's move on to Riley Green, who Chris put up a tweet earlier, and it kind of made me think about this whole thing between him and differences between Akil Baddoo. One person on Twitter mentioned, well, Baddoo needs to hit better against lefties. So has Riley Green, who basically I think will probably end up being the Tiger Rookie of the Year, because there's not really a bunch of rookies that have stood out. Has he exceeded your expectations? Has he met your expectations? Is he at a level of growth that everyone can be happy with? I'll start with you, John.
I'd say he's just about at my expectations. He hasn't lit the world on fire offensively. His OPS is under 700. I mean, he's been all right. I'd say his defense has definitely been better than I thought it would be. But I think his durability is something I think is something we should look at. He seemingly has been in the lineup, I feel like, every single day. He hasn't really missed any time since coming up. And I feel like right now he's kind of like the face of the Tigers, honestly, in a way. Like, he's more so than Spencer Torkelson. I think fans have gravitated more towards Green than Torkelson. So I would say he's probably right around where I thought he would be so far.
What about you, Chris?
I want to point out that my whole point of my tweet was not to denigrate what Riley Green has done. I think he's going to be really good.
I know. I was just trying.
I want to explain for everybody else. I just it's how quickly people have seen the kind of turn on Akil Baddoo after he was so much fun last year and it really put up impressive numbers. But I am a little bit disappointed in Riley Green, and I feel like I've said this multiple times. I feel like if he didn't get hurt, we probably would have gotten the Riley Green that I expected this year, which was more power and probably a higher average. But for whatever reason, ever since he came back from that injury, he's just been pounding the ball on the ground so much. And he's always been somewhat of a ground ball hitter, but he had a lot more line drives and hit the ball in the air with power a lot more in the minors. Part of that is I'm sure it's being in the minors, but he was doing it in spring training too. And I just something about his rehab and the way he came back, I think affected his swing a little bit. And so you see a lot of ground balls to second base from Riley Green, which is unfortunate because we're used to seeing him hit the ball in the air all over the field. Pulling it down the line, hitting it in the air the opposite way, hitting home runs the opposite way. And I think back to that next year, but I don't know what it was that happened after the injury, but it's been a slightly disappointing year for me. I mean, he's basically an average hitter.
He's a 2-WAR player.
Which is fine for now. I mean, I think that the injury could play a part of it and getting back to that normal thing. And Yupper, what about you before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be quick. I can kind of mirror Chris a little bit. I was disappointed in the power. I thought we'd see more. After I got a look at him last year, I mean, I really thought he had some opposite field power where he could drill some balls up the gap more often than he has. But again, he missed a lot of time. He's a rookie. He did some good things. There's no question. I mean, you can see the athleticism and the smooth swing. When the power does show itself, you can see there's some there. He's just not getting to it yet, but I think he will. So give him a C for the year, and that's a passing grade. So I think we'll see better things.
I'm gonna venture to say that I think Riley Green's been at least a B, and when I say that, what I mean by that is because I look at some of the at bats he had like earlier in August where he was really struggling, kind of shuffling at the plate, and then there's times where he has made adjustments a little bit. And I think that's something to consider. Like the reason why among the barometer here for the Tigers, in terms of young players, it's not often we get to see that. A player who is constantly adjusting and making making better decisions at the plate. And there's some things like, for example, his K rate's gone down a little bit. His walks are up a little bit. So I think that it's small. Again, even Detroit right now is in a position where, you're playing the Royals, you're playing the Twins, you're really playing for just essentially the end of the season and move on to 2023. But I think the Green has shown enough there that I'll be the optimist for the group here. And normally that's not my case, but I think Green has had a B season considering what he's been through injury wise. And to see him almost with full strength at running wise, comparatively speaking to the injury he had with his foot. I mean, think about the offseason. He's going to be able to heal up again and have that time. So I don't know. I'm just going to go with a B on that.
Well, is he an all-star next season, do you think?
Is he an all-star next season?
Yeah.
It really depends on the lineup around him. I mean, this is an offseason you're going into where I will I've been thinking about this, and I take away Lynn Henning's vague tweets about all these changes to come. Take that away for a second. Just do your own objective thinking for a moment. This roster, as we know it, when it ends the season next week in Seattle, might be completely different. We don't know and if Green has a lineup that can protect them and has more power, what have you, then of course. But I can't answer that question because I really, if we can have this conversation in March when the team has a better idea in the roster. But I think right now the roster way it is, no, God no. But if the roster is going to improve and there's going to be these wholesale changes, then yes, I think Green could be. So, and what Christopher said in the chat's good too is it was a full spring training 23 should help. I really believe that too, and he's definitely going to help.
For the All-Star game, there's a little bit of a difference. Is he going to be the one representative All-Star?
Yeah.
Or is he going to be a real dude All-Star? There's two different kinds,
Yeah.
So.
And also, obviously, you remember that he was 21 all this year, basically.
Yeah.
He just turned 22. He could not be fully weaponized until his fourth full season, and he'll be a 24-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, there's plenty of time for him to figure it out. It was interesting. If you look at the Zips projections for him from before the year and what actually happened, it's pretty close, except for with the power. The Zips projected him to hit, projected him to hit 268. He's hitting, what, 255 or something like that? Projected an 8.2 walk rate. It's 8.5. Strikeout rate of 27. It's 29. They're all pretty close. But Zips projected a 190 OPR ISO, 196 with 23 home runs. And in actuality, it's been 111 with 5 home runs. That's the big difference. Zips thought he would be a 3-win player based on the numbers he put up at his age in the minors. So, I mean, obviously the projection systems aren't always right, but it was mostly right except for the power, which is just kind of been the confusing thing to me. So hopefully, but we've seen that across the roster this year. So hopefully they all figure out how to hit for power again next year.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, Javi Baez does have 16 home runs in the season. He had another one today, so it could be the case where he may outside chance he hits 20. But I mean, there's still there's 6 games left, so I mean, we'd have to have 4 home runs in 6 games. I don't see that happening, but crazier things have happened. So let's move on to before we get to our segments. The last thing I wanted to do. Or actually, there's 2 things real quick. The Erie SeaWolves lose in a very heartbreaking fashion yesterday. It was one of the losses that I was at the game, and Chris and I were texting each other, and I had the game on. I had Greg on the call in my ear, and it's just one blow after another. Jason Dominguez, you always wonder what would have been if Soretti was able to make the play on that ball short for the first inning, but instead, I mean, the Patriots, they're the reason why they are the best team in AA for that reason. I mean, they won 46 games at home. They were just dominant, and they just laid out the whooping stick, 15-0 in the final. And to top it all off, they were also no hit. Soretti's walk broke that up, and it was like a kick to the balls over and over again for the SeaWolves. However, it's okay, because they won a playoff series, the first time in franchise history, and they exceeded a lot of people's expectations. And the biggest thing to take away for this is there's 3 takeaways from this. 1, Dan Soretti, who was drafted this year, had a really good playoff. 2, he had a really good playoff. He had a good season and showed a lot of promise. And one of the things that I ran into Ryan. I don't normally. I hate doing this. Like I ran into somebody. I ran into Ryan Garco at the game yesterday, and I just talked to him briefly over a slice of pizza, and he was pretty glowing about Soretti, and rightfully so. And the pitching staff, they broke records this year. Reese Olson, all-time strikeout record, and as a team, all-time strikeouts. They had a fantastic season, and Gabe Alvarez as a manager. See the wheels turning in his head. How he managed the bullpen, fantastic season. I have no complaints. Just yesterday was brutal to watch. I'm not gonna lie, but either way, all around, congratulations to the Erie SeaWolves. And Toledo finished up yesterday too. So the minor league season across the board is over. There's to be some write-ups here coming up on Tiger Minor Report about the seasons in general. But any thoughts on Erie, Chris?
Well, yeah, I mean, we went out there for their home game, and it was one of the more enjoyable games we've seen all year. Really, it was back and forth. Wilmer Flores started through 4 innings, and they brought in Brent Herter out of the bullpen, and then Parker Meadows showed up, and Gage Workman showed up, and really, it was just an exciting win. And it was unfortunate to see them go to Somerset and just get absolutely worked. I was joking like, hey, if you're going to lose, you might as well lose. And boy, yeah, I mean, that was about as definitive as a loss as you could find. But yeah, it just sucked that in both of those games, the game was basically over in the first inning. I think they gave up 5 runs in game 2 and 9 in the first inning in game 3. And Erie was a little bit shorthanded. They had to go with Ty Madden to start their final game, and he was on an innings limit basically, so he wasn't going to throw more than an inning or 2 anyway. And he's not quite ready to dominate in Double A. He's been fine, but they didn't have Reese Olson, who was on the IL. Sawyer Gibson-Long was on the IL, so they were kind of limited to who they could pitch. And they got to Madden, and then they really got to Adam Wolf, which was unexpected, given how he's pitched. But like you said, it's a really talented team over there. And it was a disappointing end to an awesome season. But somebody pointed out today, and Raj, you tweeted out last week about the Tigers having four minor league teams with winning records. Tigers ended up with the second best winning percentage overall in minor league baseball this year, just behind the Rays.
Wow.
So there's a lot to be proud of there, and Erie certainly helped with that. And like you said, Toledo had, by winning percentage, their second best season since 1965. And that 12, 13 game winning streak or whatever certainly helped there. But a lot of good baseball in the minors this year, so that's to be commended. And it's kind of a bummer that it's over. But we got AFL starting in like 3 days.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that. And the thing is about Toledo, and Chris and I were trying to find out narratives about Toledo. One narrative is out there that I wouldn't even really think about is the fact that their rotation this year was decimated because the Tigers' rotation was decimated. So the Tigers were calling down Toledo a lot this season, and the fact that they were able to be over 500 really with a kind of like a hodgepodge of bullpen guys and journey guys. Tip of the cap, really tip of the cap to how they handled the situation. Offensively speaking, I mean, they had 3 catchers to work with, not because they wanted to, because they had no choice. I mean, Dustin Garneau announced his retirement, so he'll be
friend of the podcast.
Yeah, friend of the podcast, Dustin Garneau. Hopefully, we'll ask him to come back and maybe we'll do a segment or two, Garneau's or like behind the plate with Garneau or something like that. But anyway,
he was fun at the end of last year. You remember how he came up and just was bombing the ball at the end of last year? It was crazy.
Yeah.
So,
and now it's good luck to him and his future endeavors. But yeah, Toledo this year had a lot of traffic back and forth down 75, and so I thought that considering what they've dealt with, kudos to them to be in that over 500. And Lakeland too. Lakeland with a bunch of 18-year-olds. You cannot ignore that either. There's something to be said about that. So
yeah, not to belabor this point, but like you said, there's a world out there where the Tigers have a healthy starting rotation for most of the year, which means Skubal, Mize, Matt Manning, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Michael Pineda, right? Those 5 guys, they get them for most of the year. That means Toledo's rotation for most of the year would be Alex Faedo, Bo Brisky, Joey Wentz, Garrett Hill, and whoever else the Tigers had to rely on this year that then also got hurt. So yeah, it's kind of remarkable that they won nearly 90 games with a patchwork rotation of they had like Chase Anderson and Ricardo Pinto, and for the end, Daniel Ponce de Leon showed up out of nowhere. So kudos to the staff down there in Toledo. Lloyd McClendon and the gang, who may be looking for work soon, but whatever. They did a good job in their final year, or they made a good case for themselves to stay, as it were.
All right. So the last part of our first segment is we're going to power rank the second baseman ranking for next year. So each person's given their top 5 power rankings for who could be the starting second baseman for the Tigers in 2023. So I'll start with you, Uper. Give me your 5 second baseman possibilities for the Tigers.
Well, I think I'm going to kind of cop out on the first one. I think the first one is not in the organization. I really believe that, that's a spot where Scott Harris should be able to target somebody who's not a bad player, but who is in the vein of the strike zone control kind of guy that he's hoping to find. And, we could toss a lot of names around, but I'm just, in my mind, I'm envisioning a Jed Lowry type of player, someone on that level, a veteran who's going to give you a professional at bat 3 or 4 times a night. So I think that'll be the front runner. After that, my hope is that next spring, Kreidler's hand is 100% and he has a good spring, and then he can settle into that number 2 spot and become maybe a utility guy, but be the second person in the pecking order at second base. After that, depends on what they want to do with Scope. To me, that's the player. If they're going to just cut bait, spend some cash, and just be done with him, I think that's the guy. He just doesn't seem to fit anything that Scott Harris has talked about yet. And then 4 and 5, Wenzel Perez, sure. That would be the shock of shocks if he lit it up in the spring, or maybe we're talking about some point in by Labor or Memorial Day, excuse me. He's a guy that they try. So, and then the 5th is the wild card. If they sign a shortstop this winter and shock the hell out of us, then they got to move Javi to second base.
I know where you're going with that. I know where you're going with that, because one gentleman said it, and the way I'll have to find the way that Carlos Correa said what he was basically saying he was going to do and opt out this season. And it was the way it was funny. It was kind of clever.
It was a good quote.
It was a very good quote. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, because it was essentially saying he said it without saying it. So let me find it real quick here as I do. And let's see. This is what he said on Carlos Correa on Twins being eliminated from the playoffs. It just gives me more time to go to the, what's that fashion place called? Dior.
Christian Dior.
Dior, yeah. Yeah. So, and here's what he said. This is what he said. Carlos Correa has potential return to the Twins. If you want something, then you gotta go get it. I'm the product here. If they want my product, they just gotta come and get it.
Yeah. That's the old F you pay me.
Yeah, exactly. And there's one of the some of the Twins fans. There was a tweet that I liked from Brandon Wired. Carlos Correa, you have to pay me. Twins fans, outrage.
Well, he ended up having a pretty darn good year after a slow start. He's had 4+ WAR. So.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm him, it wasn't as good as last year, but I think he's still going to opt out. And sure sounds with those fashion tastes like he'd like to be in New York, but I don't know.
I'll tell you, for me, when you think about what Scott Harris has talked about, man, Xander Bogaerts looks good to me.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, that's the guy who's going to give you the at-bats Scott Harris is looking for.
All right.
So I don't know if that's realistic, but that's where I would put my attention if I were sitting in that chair, which obviously I'm not.
All right, John, what's your 5 real quick?
Yeah, you stole it from me. Yeah, I had Javier Baez number 1 because I just think I was going to say Bogaerts too. I really like his fit for the Tigers at shortstop. My number 2 is Brandon Drury. He's going to be a free agent this offseason. I think he profiles well because you can move him around the field. He can potentially play some outfield because you have a lot of lefties in that outfield right now. So if you wanted to platoon him, I'm still somewhat a believer in Jonathan Scope. I might be on an island there. I think his defense has been solid enough, and I just think he still has the power to be a 20 home run hitter. And he's only 30 years old. I'm probably sitting on an island on that one. My number 4 is Wenzel Perez. I'm really, really impressed with him. Switch hitter in Erie this year, 22 years old. I think they need to give him a chance at second, and hopefully he can show out in spring. And then I had Harold Castro at number 5, just because he's been one of the Tigers' better hitters this year. So I think he should at least be in the conversation. So that's my top 5.
All right, Chris, what about you?
Yeah, so I don't know if you did one. I may be stealing yours, but yeah, my number 1 is Andre Lipsius. I just want to see, he's the guy in the system who fits the idea of what they want to do. I think
number 1.
Yeah, he's in AAA. He put up an 830 OPS this year. He's walked as much as he strike out. He's got gap power. He's a very reliable defender, if not a ton of range. And he's a right-handed hitter, which suddenly they need some of. So he'd be my number one option there. It is. I thought that we might see him at the end of this year, but I guess not. You might argue Kreidler, but I think Lipsius has more of an offensive upside, and he's just one of those guys that grows on you. The more you watch him play, the more he plays for you, the more you like him. And so I don't know if he will make the team next year, but I think we'll see him at some point next year. Number 2 is Winslow Perez. I just like the idea of them going internal here with either of those guys. Perez, I think, has more offensive upside than Lipsius, just as he's faster. He has arguably as much raw power, and he's a switch hitter. There's some defensive question marks there, and some health question marks. But if he, like you said, if he goes out there and tears it up in spring training, then I say, what the hell? Let the kid give him a shot. That he's got some potential. My third is a hypothetical trade for John Berti. John Berti of the Florida Marlins, Miami Marlins, as it were. He's older. He's not much of an offensive player, but he's a Michigan native, and he'll rock a 10%, 12% walk rate, and he's one of the fastest players in baseball, and he's a good defender. And I think with him, you could play a little bit more of the style of baseball that AJ Hinch seems to want. Getting guys on, putting pressure on the defense, things like that. I don't know what it would take to trade for him, but like I said, he's a little bit older, and I don't think it would be too much. Fortunately, Miami seems to have a lot of the same issues the Tigers do. They've got plenty of pitching, but they need more offense. So I don't know what it would take. You might have to trade an outfielder. The Tigers don't have a ton of those. But and then after that, I have Scope and Harold Castro. It wouldn't shock me if Jonathan Scope turns it around next year and puts up another average offensive season. He's done this before, where I think his 2018 season was he absolutely cratered. Not with the power to the point he did this year, but he bounced back for 3 solid seasons after that. He's not old. He's 31, 32, probably younger than Berti. So, and then Harold Castro, we like Harold Castro. He hits for average, but that's all he does. And if you've got Harold Castro playing every day, you're not a good team unless he's your 9th hitter and everybody else is a plus player. So, no, he's my 5th option. Give me the young guys and then trade for speed.
I like it.
So for myself, I'm going to go a little slightly different than what Chris did. But, yeah, number 1 would be Andre Lipsius because, I've heard, and he has a position versus.
Rod, you froze up for me. I don't know if it worked.
I don't hear him.
Yeah, it's that frozen look of horror right there, like you fell out of.
Yeah.
He can play third. He can second. He plays short. All right. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Nope.
Somewhat.
Come on. Why is it freezing up?
Oh, there goes Raj. I don't know. Chris, I liked you. Yeah, I like yours. I didn't think of trades like that, but that's a good shout.
So, and first of all, let's see. I'll put up this comment right here from Stop It. The Michigan native scene is not worth anything. Get players because they're good. I agree. I'm not. Yeah. It's just kind of a fun story, right? You get a native guy, and Eric Haas. Hey, he's from Michigan, and it turns out he's okay. But I like more what Berti can do as a player. He's, like I said, he's not an offensive force by any means, but if he's going to walk a ton and steal bases, I think that, like I said, I think that's the sort of thing that Hinch would like to do, as long as he's got some hitters in the lineup.
Yeah, I love the Bogarts idea, but I just think if you could get him on a shorter term contract, like kind of what Correa did this offseason, I think that would be perfect. But I don't know if that's going to happen. But I would love his fit here.
Well, and to that point, to the short term contracts, if you look at Scott Harris's tenure, albeit brief, in San Francisco, they didn't sign anybody to long term deals. There were a lot of shorter deals. When they did Gossman for 1 year, basically, and things like that. So, yeah, it wouldn't shock me if they go out there and find somebody for a 1 or 2 year deal.
Yeah, all the best deals this offseason, like Scherzer, Verlander, Correa, they're all shorter term deals. I feel like that's, if you can make a deal happen like that, that's the best way to go.
And our buddy Mark Gorash has been, I don't know what to blow up his spot, but he's been working out this way to trade for DJ LeMahieu. That's his big thing. Trade for DJ LeMahieu.
Ooh.
I don't see that.
No,
I don't know.
no.
And then also, but we've discussed multiple trades, like Jonathan India. Would the Reds move him? Do we want him? What's going on there?
You buy low on him, but I don't know if they want to move him.
So sorry about the first time in a long time that my internet has actually crashed on me I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's people around me on there. Anyway, enough. So what did I say was number one? Did you guys hear my number one?
Was it Lipsius?
Yeah, Lipsius. Okay, so Andre Lipsius is number one. I think that number two, people might think this is strange, but this one, it's kind of depends here. So Colton Wong has a team option for 2023. So the Brewers might not pick him up. He's got 3.5 WAR season right now. He's got OPS plus over 119. He's a left-handed bat. I know that Chris mentioned earlier that we might need some right-handed bats, but look, if Colton Wong's out there, he fits exactly that kind of Scott Harris mentality a little bit. He does.
Yep.
He strikes out less than 20%, so he's at 17.7%. His walk rate is about 9. He's got WRC plus of 117. I'll be fine if they're not that plays. So if they're not going to stick with scope, then Colton Wong, and this is something too I've talked about him before. That would be a good option for that. So number 3 would be going back to John Scope. 4, Ryan Kreidler, who saw play the outfield today. So the position versatility is endless with him, so he can go anywhere. And then number 5 would be Winfield Perez. So I just think that if the Tigers decide to go a little bold with Wong, it depends the Brewers bring him back or not. But right now, I think Milwaukee's still fighting for Philadelphia for their last spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's my power 5. But Wong is the one we throw in there to burst it up a little bit. But yeah, and Scope, look, a lot of people, I see Tiger fans having a lot of foregone conclusions that everyone's going to be gone. Who knows who's going to stick around? But
yeah, I feel like if you have the same opinion on Candelario, you should feel the same way about Scope, because I feel like they're very similar in a lot of the same ways. They both have had a good track record and both have really struggled this year. So if you're going to bring back Candelario, it's like, why would you feel differently about Scope? Unless you're just doing one or the other, I guess. Yeah, pick your poison kind of thing with that. Yeah. So. But no, it was a good conversation piece, because the Tigers this could be brought across shortstop, third base. It could be anywhere really applicable. So now it is time for Inside the Numbers. All right, John, what is your insider number for this week? So I recently wrote an article at Woodward Sports about the Tigers bullpen. I think the bullpen has been really, really great this year. And so my number is 2, and there's only 2 teams in the major leagues, 2 bullpens that have given up less home runs than the Detroit Tigers bullpen. And that is the Houston Astros at 33 home runs and the Yankees at 36. The Tigers are third best in baseball at 44 home runs given up. So I just want to shout out the Tigers bullpen, because I think there's just a lot of good stuff going on there. They're 8th in baseball with a 3.42 ERA. And I think what I really love about the bullpen is they're still very young. Like guys like Alex Lange, Will Vest, Soto is still relatively young, Joe Jimenez. And so they're going to be young and controllable for years to come. So I really want to shout out the Tigers bullpen, and it's been a top 10 bullpen in baseball this year. It's been the bright spot for me for the Detroit Tigers in 2022.
Okay. Uper, what is your inside number?
First, 0 and 4. Earlier this week, I tweeted out, I saw a stat that the Braves are now 1 week away from going through the entire season with 0 sacrifice bunts, successful ones, which would be obviously a record. So as someone who spent a lot of the, I would say, early internet phase of baseball chatting, railing against sacrifice bunts, this is quite the end game to see a team on the verge of 0. for the year. And in fact, and I saw in Fangraphs today, the number 4, they have the least bunt attempts period in baseball this year with only 4. And the next lowest team is 12. So they're well ahead of the curve. And on their 4 bunts, interestingly enough, they've created 5 outs. So even when they did bunt, it was a catastrophe for them. They had a double play. They had 1 hit, but then the guy got thrown out at second base trying to stretch it on a bad throw. So their minimum bunting has even led to more bad things. So, and I guess that's where the sport is going. The Braves have taken it to a new level this year.
That's a good one. I like that. Chris, what is, they're basically giving the middle finger a small ball. Chris, what is your inside number?
So mine is 97 and 8. And this is a rare occasion for me. It's always fun. StatCast has unveiled a new metric, at least one that we can now track. It is arm strength. So we can now see the hardest throws from players throughout the year. And 97 will be the hardest throw by a Tiger over the last 3 years, and it belongs to one Willie Castro. Willie Castro, 97 miles an hour. It's actually the 45th hardest max throw. Not the 45th hardest throw, because the guys who could throw 100 probably do that multiple times. But 45th hardest max throw out of, looking here, about 516 players who have at least 100 track throws. So you're talking top 10% there. And what's interesting about that, people are always like, why is Willie Castro still on this team? Why does he play so much? And the answer is because of his tools. I think we've talked about this before, but last year Willie Castro hit a ball 115.4 miles per hour for exit velocity. This year his average sprint speed is 28.4 feet per second. So how many MLB players can say that they have a max exit velocity of 115, a sprint speed of 28 feet per second, and an arm of 97? And the answer to that is 8. There are 8 players who can say that. And they're pretty interesting players. There's Aristides Aquino, the Punisher, not a great player, but pretty tooled up. And you've got Ronald Acuna, Byron Buxton, Julio Rodriguez, Fernando Tatis, O'Neill Cruz, Avisail Garcia, and Willie Castro. So, tools don't make you a player, right? Like we thought, there's a couple players on there who aren't all that great, but then you got a couple superstars on there. And when you have tools like that, you keep getting chances because, all things being equal, you'll take the guy who can do the spectacular occasionally over the guy who doesn't do whatever. So there you go.
Well, I guess it's a foregone conclusion by some people on Twitter that he's going to be gone. Again,
he may be, but
he may be, but there's no. You're right.
Get a chance somewhere else.
Yeah, he will, and I don't. Again, there's some really weird, irrational hatred towards Willie Castro. And I know this person doesn't listen to the podcast, but just chill. There's some numbers that indicate otherwise. But whatever. What do I know? Yeah. Anyway, so my inside number is 238, and the number of 238 and 239. So this is a number. So the 238 is the batting average of one Juan Soto since he came to the Padres. He's batting 218 in the month of September. But the reason why I bring up the other number, and it's really, again, it's the damn Cardinals. And that number, the 239 number, is the current batting average of one Lars Newbar. But, Brandon Donovan's going to get some rookie. He's had a really good year this year, 279, 389, and 377. But the reason why I bring up those two, the St. Louis outfield and the Padres outfield, is they traded Harrison Bader to the Yankees, and they decided to go with it. Paid off in spades for the Cardinals, who just wrapped up a Central Division title. And we all assumed, and we did this in the offseason when the Padres did all the free agent acquisitions. Everyone lost their nut that the Padres are going to go around and turn around and win this, beat the LA Dodgers. No one. The Dodgers have 107 wins. They have 100 wins, over 100. I think it was what they had 102, 103 last year, Chris?
106.
106. They have 213 victories in the last 2 years, ladies and gentlemen. right now. All right, that is a juggernaut. The Padres are 86 and 69, which is no slouch. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you look at the playoffs, I mean, look, they're gonna, as far as matchups go and all that. San Diego's had a good season.
Yeah, they're
But
probably gonna.
go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, they're probably gonna catch the Braves or the Mets in the first round.
That being said,
yeah,
I was to say, but then you also got what happened with Josh Hader. It's just the point is, nothing is a foregone. That's what I love about baseball. Nothing is a foregone conclusion with the trade deadline. And the St. Louis Cardinals, you cannot write off the Cardinals. You cannot do it. Can't do it. I am. It is like you talk about the mysteries of life, the mysteries of the earth, the Stonehenge, the Egyptians, the pyramids,
Magnets. How do they work?
Yeah, how much? How you build a tunnel in water? The Detroit, like the Windsor Tunnel, just all these cool things. Then you have the St. Louis Cardinals, and you wonder why people hate them so much.
Devil magic,
because every year they have a 90 win team, and they somehow were able to do it again. I don't get it, but
I don't know. I like the Cardinals. I don't know. You don't like the Cardinals?
I didn't say I didn't like them either or.
Oh.
I mean, I respect their ability. I mean, I have a couple. I used to be a bigger fan of the Cardinals, and I have a couple caps somewhere in my collection, but I respect the Cardinals for how they do it and able to stay with it. I don't like them for 06.
Oh.
Not one bit. I mean, that's kind of a given, but that's also revenge. Then again, it's also revenge for them being the Tigers beat them in 68. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, you can't hate the player. Can't hit the game. Is that how it's?
Don't hate the player, hate the game.
Yeah. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's our inside numbers for the week. Now it is time for the good, the bad, and the ugly, or whatever you want to call it, because maybe we're optimists this week. Who knows? All right. So, Chris, what is your good, bad, ugly this week?
Well, you almost led me right into that. My good this week is the Los Angeles Dodgers, because
Segway.
Yeah, and now I think it's one of the easiest things to do is overlook greatness when it's consistent, and especially annoying when it's not your team that's great for very long. But 100-game season, winning 100 games in a season is pretty much the mark of greatness for a baseball team. The Tigers have done it 5 times in franchise history. Most recently, 1984. So it's been almost 40 years. The Dodgers have 107 wins heading into tonight. They won 106 last year. They won 106 in 2019 and 104 in 2017. They had a lousy 92-win season in 2018. They've won the division in 9 of the last 10 seasons. Only last year in the Giants' miracle year did it broke that up. So that their run started in 2013. The Tigers were still good in 2013. Remember? And it's funny looking back. I was looking back at the best players on that 2013 Dodgers team. You know who their best hitter was in 2013? Hanley Ramirez.
Oh, yeah.
Hanley Ramirez. Wow.
Hanley Ramirez.
Wow.
And then Yasiel Puig, Adrian Gonzalez, Juan Uribe, and Mark Ellis.
That's a free agent hodgepodge, isn't that, essentially, right?
Yeah. I mean, just, they had solid players. In 2013, Mookie Betts was a 20-year-old in A-ball in the Red Sox system. Freddie Freeman was 23 in his first All-Star year with Braves. Trey Turner was a sophomore at NC State. Will Smith was a senior in high school. Gavin Lux was a freshman in high school. It's just hilarious how they just doesn't matter. They bring in good players from all over. They have allowed 494 runs this year as a pitching staff. That's 3.2 runs per game. And for reference, the Tigers, the worst offense in baseball, have scored 3.4 runs per game. The Dodgers turned everyone into an offense worse than the Tigers. And so it's just remarkable to me. I don't think good is a big enough word for it. It's greatness for like a decade long. The only thing that's getting in the way is kind of that pesky lack of World Series titles. They have the one in the 60-game year. Other than that, they haven't been able to finish it off. But it's one of the best runs in baseball history, I think.
No question.
Yeah. So my bad is Matt Manning's arm soreness. There's always varying degrees of arm soreness. seems like every time this year, though, whenever there was a small, it's not a big deal, it ends up being a very big deal months and months out. And I don't know. I'm sure they're just being cautious now, but it's just rough to see the Tigers' top 3 pitching prospects or young pitchers. They combined for 190 innings this year. And they've all went down with arm injuries. And there are 10, 15 pitchers in baseball this year who are going to finish with more innings than that by themselves, including, Alcantara, who's got a 220 down in Miami. So, yeah, it's just rough. You hate to see that. I do wonder if, Scott Harris will take a real close look at the training and injury prevention system this year. And I don't know. Or maybe it's just common for 2 players to go on the IL with spine injuries in the same week. Maybe that happens to everybody. I don't know.
It's crazy. And don't blame the trainer. Don't do that. It's so dumb. He's fat, so therefore it's his problem. What? Get the hell out of here. By the way, I like this comment from Christopher in YouTube, which says, you know what's weird? Twins used to develop their talent the same way the Cardinals currently do, and they were pesky and competitive. But then they moved away from that. You're spot on, my friend.
Yeah,
but at the same time, we talked about it before. I think the Twins still do a great job getting international talent. They got Miranda this year, who's just kind of quietly putting up a very solid rookie year, and he wasn't really much of anything until last year. He had a breakout year as a prospect. And we talked about Polanco and all the other guys. I think the Twins still do a good job. They don't, they're not quite as good as the Cardinals at that. The Cardinals, they get every year, it's like 3 new 25-year-old white guys who were drafted in the 8th round. And so they put up like a 4-win season. You're like, who the hell is, they just got a bunch of Andre Lipschitz over there. So, but yeah, that was my bad. My ugly is the Chicago White Sox. And this is, pardon my schadenfreude here, but they won today, but they're 2-8 in their last 10, and there's a strong chance they finish the year under 500, which I don't think a lot of people.
Chicago sucks.
And we all had fun blaming on La Russa all year, and it seemed like when Cairo took over, things got better. But no, 2-8, and it's just a weird situation where it's amazing how quickly a promising young team can look like they're at their crossroads already. They just had a brutal offensive season. Javi Baez hit a 16th home run this year. Chicago's leader is Andrew Vaughn at 17. They haven't had any huge power production. You got Jose Abreu, who's having another great year, but he's got 15 home runs, and he's going to be a free agent, and he's 36. What do you do with that? Do you bring him back? How much do you pay him? Tim Anderson and Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez, they can't seem to stay healthy. Juan Moncada has just been a guy. There's nothing special there about him. He's a solid defender. And then you look at, Moncada has a 79 WRC plus. Yasmani Grandal has a 69 WRC plus this year. It was 158 last year. Talk about a huge drop off. I don't know what happened there. And then the pitching, Dylan Cease has been awesome this year, right? It's Cy Young candidate. That's great to see. But after that, their second best pitcher is Johnny Cueto, who was a minor league free agent. It was basically like their Willie Peralta last year. Lance Lynn has been okay. He's just kind of average. Lucas Giolito has is a 5 ERA this year. It's basically bottom 5 for pitchers with 150 innings. He's not been good. Michael Kopech hasn't taken a step forward. It's like, I don't know, and they don't have much help coming on the farm system. It's a very lowly ranked farm system. They have a couple interesting guys, but yeah, it's to that point where you wonder. I mean, I assume that they're going to just try to get the gang back together for one more year, but it wouldn't shock me also if they turn around and try to do another sell-off and rebuild, because they're staring down some ugliness in the next 4 or 5 years if they don't.
How many times does Rick Hahn get to rebuild?
I don't think he'll.
I would think this is it. I don't think they get a chance after this. That's why I think they'll bring everybody back next year. But yeah, it's stunning how quickly things have gone. So, and maybe everybody will turn it around next year and they'll have a great season. They still have the talent, but just everything went wrong for them this year.
So you know how you look at grandfather clock and it's like the most consistent piece of equipment out there? I consider it. Brandon Day from Bless You Boys said one of the things, he said something to me to our group chat a few years ago that still is like a grandfather clock, consistent on time. And that is, wait for the White Sox to implode and you'll be fine. And he's dead on. He's dead on. He's been dead on. We've watched this circus since they won the World Series in 2005. everybody. Oh, look, I bought in the White Sox hype too, and I mean I like the White Sox in terms of because of all the Cuban players they have and all that. A little biased myself, but you knew it's just like all right, there you go, falling apart.
The amount of talent they've had through there and the lack of winning is stunning.
Yeah.
All right, John, what is your good, bad, and the ugly?
All right, so my good was just seeing Miggy hit a home run yesterday. He also had another hit too, but I just feel like we're at the point now where you got to cherish the moments we have left with him. Me personally, he's like the last remaining player from my childhood, other than I guess Verlander. So every time I see him get a hit or hit a home run, it's like, oh wow, that really happened. But then it puts a smile on your face. So that was good. It's who knows how many Miggy home runs we have left. My bad is Jared Kelenic. I just see a team like the Mariners. They're gonna be in the postseason, hopefully, unless they completely collapse. But their offense, man, I just don't see where they're gonna get their offense from. Come postseason time, and it's unfortunate seeing you've talked about Julio Rodriguez a lot. You just imagine if Kelenic could live up to some of the hype that was put on him. I mean, to have those two young guys, carrying that offense. I don't know. I think it's disappointing because, I mean, the guy right now, Kelenic, he's hitting 148. He's got a 52 OPS plus. I mean, he's just been one of the worst hitters in baseball pretty much, which I don't think a lot of people saw coming. And then my ugly is just the Phillies over the last couple of games. They've lost 5 in a row. They got swept by the Cubs, which that can't happen. And for the Phillies, I mean, they're only a half game above the Braves right now for that final wild card spot, and that just really shouldn't be the case. They shouldn't be having to fight for a playoff spot right now, and just 3-7 in their last 10. They've lost 5 in a row. If they were to miss out on the playoffs this year, another collapse for them. I mean, where do you go with this team in the offseason? All that money that they have invested into this team. I mean, I couldn't even imagine the outrage in Philly if they were to miss out on the playoffs. So they really need to get it together. They got 4 against Washington, which is a good sign for them, and then 3 against Houston to end the season. I feel like in terms of pressure, there's no one with more pressure right now than the Phillies. They need to get into the postseason this year. So that was my ugly.
So as far as Jared Kelenic goes, though, I kind of beg to differ a little bit, only because if you look at his last 23 plate appearances, he's batting .273, and he's got a WRC plus of 161. So he, again, very small sample size, but maybe he figured out something. I don't know. His exit velocity is also up from when he was up before. So that could boast well. He could be riding that into the postseason. Not sure, but Kelenic's numbers in the last couple weeks, in the last week or so, very small sample size. But if you look at some of the sample sizes he's had all season long, this is one of his best stretches. Just to play devil's advocate,
okay.
Kelenic. Well, so, but I think Kelenic. I think for Seattle, I think their bullpen will help them get through that a little bit. But you're right, though. There is some offensive ineptitude that they might have to struggle with. So they would look like if the playoffs were to start today in terms of the wild card and how that would go, they would take on Cleveland because Cleveland's the 3rd seed.
Don't sleep on the Cleveland Guardians.
Oh no, hey, we're not sleeping on them. Just saying that's
all
how
right.
it would start the season. So, Uper, what is your good, bad, the ugly?
Okay, be real quick here because a couple of mine were already touched on, which is cool. My good, Max Scherzer wins number 200 in his career the other night with a 7-2 win over Milwaukee. People who listened or people who read stuff I've written in the past know that I'm, one of Max Scherzer's biggest fans. This is probably the year I've watched the least amount of Max Scherzer starts. Most years I make sure to catch quite a few even after he left the Tigers. Love that guy. Very happy he won 200. Gotta believe he's got a shot at 250. I think he'll hang around. I don't think there's any reason why he's going to be leaving. And I think 300 probably a stretch, probably won't happen, but he's a Hall of Famer, and congratulations to him on getting 200. My bad was the Phillies. So real quick, as John mentioned, they've lost their 5 in a row. They've had this history the last 5 years of really bad Septembers. This is just building onto it, but it really started 1964. They're going to, all these things are going to be written about. The 64
Kids.
Phillies were 6.5 up with 12 games to go.
Is that the Whiz Kids, Uper?
Yes, they were 6.5 up, 12 to go. Gene Mauch is the manager. He is short on pitching. Ex-Tiger Jim Bunning and a guy named Chris Short, who was a very good pitcher for a while in the 60s. They were starting on 2 days rest because they had nobody else. They lose 10 in a row and they blow the National League. It kind of was a stain on Gene Mauch's career the rest of the way as a skipper because he had a couple other teams that folded down the stretch too when he was in Minnesota and California. So the Phillies are going to be trying to shed any memories of 1964 over this next week. And my ugly was Matt Manning too. I mean, yes, it could be minor. Let's pray that it is if you're a praying person, because the Tigers just don't need it. It made sense not to push it. I mean, the game meant nothing. Next week's start would mean nothing. So just let it go. Hope he comes back in the spring and kind of picks up what he's left up. Because he has looked pretty good in his 65 innings this year. So it's something to build on if he's healthy.
So my good this week, and we haven't mentioned him at all, is Aaron Judge hitting number 61. Yeah. And the reason why I wanted to mention this because I know in Detroit people don't like the Yankees. A lot of people don't. Well, depends when you go to Comerica because there's a lot of Yankee fans that show up. And by the way, Yankees fans travel well for their minor league system. I was sitting at the first base side taking pictures in Erie on Saturday night, and a lot of Somerset fans were there. And they were there, and a lot of them was just like, "Look, I'm just looking for a good game to watch." And some knew, and some people were there to watch the Patriots, but definitely a lot of people were actually. So in the section I was at, but that was intriguing to see because it's something that I'm only used to seeing with Toronto fans because Toronto Blue Jay fans also travel very well. But I digress. Lindsay Adler and Ken Rosenthal did a really good article this week that came out this morning rather on The Athletic on the adjustments he has made in terms of even becoming a good hitter. And I talked about this morning with Adam on the morning show, and you can check out the segment on the YouTube short side of things for Woodward. But Richard Schlesnick, who's been Judge's personal hitting coach, that started moving his hands behind his ear to the front of his face, and that allowed him to be early and slow. And you look at his numbers, and the reason why I bring this up, Adam brought this up about the Triple Crown year that Miguel Cabrera has, because he could potentially win the Triple Crown. Batting average wise, he looks like he's going to win the Triple Crown. Pretty much, right? Yeah.
I mean, I think Luis Arias has a chance to beat him in average, but
yeah. And Cabrera, what's up? Oh, I thought you said something. I'm sorry. Cabrera does have the higher batting average, but here's where it stands in terms of they talked about too. What I liked about the article was they talked about how many hits he was doing pull side, because that pull side was something he wasn't doing before. Just in terms of hitting skill, his barrel rate's a little higher than it was in 2017. His swing and miss rate's gone from 35% to 29%. So from a contact rate is also up as well. But it's in terms of getting back to the Miguel Cabrera Triple Crown comparison, Miguel Cabrera had a WAR of 7.3. Aaron Judge has a WAR of 10.4. 10.4. I can't remember. Again, I haven't done a deep dive on players who have finished in double-digit WAR the end of the season. But holy shit. And pardon my language, but holy shit. No, and there's, to me, we got a good question there, Doug. We'll get to your question here shortly about expectations. Actually, we'll ask you questions after this. So, Aaron Judge, I know that people talk about the right field portion in Yankee Stadium, all that, but they showed an article that the dimensions don't matter for Aaron Judge. Respect is due. And to have a 10.4 season where you're getting an OPS plus of 213. 213. Sorry to yell in the microphone, ladies and gentlemen, but holy shit. So pardon me again with the language, but it had to be said. We don't often go on about New York teams in here because people in Detroit don't want to hear it. I mean, then again, the Tigers have beaten the Yankees in the postseason, so there you go. But
And Judge is winning the sabermetric Triple Crown too, which Miggy did not do that year. The year he won the Triple Crown, he actually was the 5th or 6th in on base percentage. Judge is top in on base, slugging, everything. He's Miguel Cabrera in center field, plus 20 home runs. It's insane.
It is insane. There's nothing you can. Again, respect where respect is due. That is simply, you can't say any more than that. So, as far as my bag goes this week, I'm gonna say, and I know Philly's been mentioned a couple times, but in terms of expectations, in terms of where we see things, I'm gonna give it to the Brewers. And I know if they win tonight, they'll go ahead of. Right now, they're ahead of the Marlins 2-0 in the top of the 8th. But the Brewers had expectations of winning the division this year. And so, to me, I think the reason why I put the Brewers in the bad is because they're witnessing the Philadelphia. They might get in the postseason because Philadelphia is collapsing. And the Brewers are peaking at the right time. But to me, again, the Josh Hader trade looks good right now on paper. But I think that the fact that the Brewers had to come to this end of the season to get to the postseason, me at least, for a team that I think had higher expectations, to me is bad. And I know it sounds like I'm being nitpicky, but it's just as far as, and then, I mean, of course, the injuries with the honorable mention, of course, Matt Manning and all that. So, which is Brewers, you can handle enough pitching. And my ugly this week, well, there's a lot of things in baseball right now that are kind of there's some really good storylines across. I mean, there's some really good things we feel positive about. Blue Jays clinched the wild card, so that was the thing that happened. You have all these cool things, the Triple Crown, and Reyes does have the lead in average, by the way, as of right now. But the ugly is the Carlos Correa situation because. The Twins, I mean, I think the Twins knew what they were going to get with this, but also it's also tied with really what's going on with the hurricanes down in Florida. We've seen seals on sidewalks. We've seen sharks in like streets. The Correa thing is kind of a little bit of we knew that was going to happen, but all the people down in we know a lot of people down in Florida. James Chipman, we have Sherry, we have Terry down our Lakeland folks that help us out so much. And that whole situation sucks. Fort Myers Beach is completely dry and just all this weird things going on. But I saw today, a huge, I think it was a seal or walrus on the sidewalk. And I thought, I'm like, what am I witnessing here? That's ugly. And
there was a manatee.
It was manatee. Thank you. It was a manatee. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have no insert some sort of sea creature in there, but
I hope that poor bastard found a home today.
Yeah. I mean, and right now, one of the things that it's not really mentioned, and if you look at the power grid across across the world, there's not a lot of places in Cuba that have a lot of power right now. So my heart goes out to the citizens of Cuba and those island countries that don't have the resources to get going. Puerto Rico too has been struggling with that. So the entire Caribbean, it's ugly, and my sympathies to everybody out there. Hey, para toda la gente que está escuchando aquí. Yeah, so there you
go. I have one of my good friends lives in Northport, Florida, which is essentially right where the storm landed. And they, like 2 days before, I'm like, hey, you guys leave? And they're like, nah. I'm like, all right, that's a choice. And they were like, yeah, the people, the natives of Florida, they're not worried at all. And I was like, well, okay, that's because they've not been hit by a hurricane yet. It's been 100 years. That doesn't mean it can't happen. And it did. But fortunately, they all survived, obviously. Yeah, in the middle of the storm, he texted me. He's like, hey, can you tell me how fast the wind is going in Northport right now? I'm like, what? You can't check your phone? So I looked at my phone, and it was 94 miles an hour. It's just to get me over fastball. So,
yeah,
but Glad our friends survived.
Yes.
All right, so now it's time for questions. We'll start with the one in YouTube, and then we'll go from there. And this one's from Doug Kloss. What has been a bigger disappointment this year, the Tigers or White Sox, based on the preseason expectations? I'm going to say Chicago all day long. I don't know you guys, but
yeah.
Well, I would say Chicago only because if they fulfill their regular season expectations, then they got a legitimate shot at a world title because you're in the playoffs as a division winner. So yeah, that's got to be the big letdown. And again, it all boils down to they just made a lot of bad decisions in the front office in terms of leadership, and saddled themselves with a manager who wasn't going to inspire a whole lot of confidence.
all right, so we're agreement across the board then.
Yeah. I'd say so.
Thank you for the question, Doug, on YouTube. So this one is from what's up, Chris?
No, man, I agree that the White Sox were supposed to win the division. The Tigers were like, hey, if everything goes right, maybe they'll win the division. Maybe they'll be above 500. White Sox were supposed to win like 90 games, and they're looking at a below 500 season. That's a huge.
They had World Series expectations. I feel like, I mean, they made the playoffs last year, so this year they were supposed to take another step, and so
I think they were power ranked the second best team coming into the best team in baseball. Or I think the American League, maybe.
I think it was them and the Blue Jays. They were like the two favorites in the AL.
Yeah. So this one comes from Mark at Tigers 2435. Hey, Rogelio, how do you see Badu fitting into the Tigers' plans in 2023? When he's right, he's a menace on the base fast. I think he just needs a few swing changes. Bat speed looks fine. I would agree with you on that, Mark. I think we see a little bit of that today. He batted leadoff for the first time, I believe. I think Evan Woodbury said since May 5th, something to that effect. And look, again, Chris posted the numbers earlier, similar to Riley Green. I think Badu mentally this was last year. He came up from, again, low A ball his first full season. There's going to be some growing pains with it, but I think I see enough there that there's potential that I think he'll be either a fourth outfielder or maybe he'll start in the outfield this year. The Tigers outfield as a whole, Hinch mentioned this today in the press conference before the game in the press room that Carpenter deserves a look, and he's got to hit with more consistency. Obviously, against left-handed pitching, all his home runs came off fastballs, which I mentioned in my article earlier. So getting better at off speed, and it's the same thing with. I think there's a lot of potential about Badu myself, but what do you guys think?
I don't know. I mean, I think the outfield, like you have Riley Green, you have Austin Meadows. I think Kerry Carpenter deserves a look. You have three lefties already. You have Parker Meadows, who's probably going to be up with the club next year. That's another lefty. I think you probably start him off in Toledo next year. I mean, unless he just has a good spring training, I'm rolling with Carpenter, Green, and Austin Meadows, and then you find a right-handed batter as a fourth outfielder right now. I don't really see where Badu fits in for the major league club next year.
Anybody else?
Go ahead, Chris.
Well, we got another question from a guy named Cameron, who was kind of a similar question. It was about who do you keep DFA or send down as Badu, Carpenter, Willie Castro. But yeah, I mean I think the Tigers would love it if Akil Badu won the job in spring training next year, because he's the most well-rounded of any of the options. He's got power. He's hardly shown any of it this year, but we've seen it. We've seen raw power. He's hitting 450-foot home runs before. He's got speed. He's obviously got plenty of speed. He walks even still, despite his terrible, season at the plate. He's still got a double-digit walk rate, I believe. And he's even improved on defense. He missed a play today, but he's grading out much better this year than he did last year. So, and he's young, so I think there's a lot of things there that you like. At the same time, the Tigers need power, and Kerry Carpenter is basically their best power hitter right now. So, yeah, I mean, I think you certainly don't give up on Akil Badu yet. He's still has another year pre-arb. He's got the tools. He's young. You keep him around, see if you can get him going. But I don't know. I also wouldn't discount Kerry Carpenter winning the job in spring training either. He goes out there and hits 5-6 home runs in spring training. You got to bring him up north, right? You need power, and he has it.
Yeah, I actually believe I'm probably in a minority here. I think they're in a good spot with Akil Baddoo. It's not. I don't think anybody saw this level of struggle this year, but it was reasonable to expect that the league was going to catch up to him a little bit after he kind of stormed through his rookie season when nobody knew what he was about and he came up from A-ball. But the good news is he has options. They're going to be able to play him in the minors if they need to. They have to keep working with him. He has the athleticism and the power, and as Chris mentioned, the patience, which sounds like it will fit with Scott Harris's model. He's a talented guy. He's going to get many more opportunities, I believe. Whether that's starting in Toledo or starting in Detroit doesn't matter. He'll be in the organization. A lot depends on what right-handed batter they bring off the market and what is Austin Meadows next year, which is a bigger mystery than what is Akil Baddoo next year, really.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that it took some time for Meadows adjusted in AA. And so it could be some time with him. It's not, I don't think Meadows could be in the part of the conversation. Don't get me wrong.
Austin.
He's talking Austin, not Parker.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I was thinking of Parker, but
there are too many Meadowses.
Yeah,
too many.
Meadows times two.
Not to talk for the second time, but Baddoo could also be the sort of guy that you trade to a team that thinks the same way we do. Like, look at those tools, look what he can do. Maybe we can fix him and turn him into an all-star. He's got that level of potential. So you trade him now. I mean, you'd be trading on a low point, but if the Tigers know internally, like, hey, this is as good as it gets, then maybe they can get something out of him. But I think, Scott Harris came out and said it, right? There's going to be a lot of moves. So we'll find out soon enough. But I do think that ideally that he'd be the guy starting every day in left field.
Yeah. Again, this is going to be, to me, one of the most exciting off seasons we've seen in a long time, because literally if we have to track patterns that we've never tracked before. I mean, again, it was the last couple of seasons. I'm not going to lie. I think that we've done a really good job of, if not to toot our own horns, ladies and gentlemen, but it was predictable who they were going to pick or who they were going to sign. Oh, Julio Teheran? Oh, yeah, of course. He's an arm with problems. Why not sign him? I'm sorry, but like, he was shooting fish in a barrel. Like it was. I'm sorry. I mean, not to sound like I'm being a know-it-all, but I normally don't gatekeep like that. But good God, man! I mean, it's just, and this time now we don't have that, and I'm fine with it, quite frankly. So, we'll see what happens.
Can I just go back real quick? I looked up the PECOTA projections before the season. PECOTA win projections for teams, and the White Sox were at 95. And the Tigers were at 67. The Tigers might actually hit their PECOTA projections 4 wins away. The White Sox are 18 wins away. So anyway.
All right. So, what was that question, Chris? It was
so that
murder. It sounded like murder, death, kill almost.
Yeah, Cameron. It was kind of like, who do you keep DFA and send down between Baddoo, Carpenter, and Castro? I kind of mentioned that. I think of those three, Willie Castro would be the one that you part ways with. He's going to be. This is his first ARB eligible year, and he doesn't walk. He's got a career like 85 WRC plus. I mentioned earlier, I made the case for his tools earlier. He's got really impressive tools, and maybe that works as a utility guy, but he doesn't seem to fit Harris's profile. I think AJ Hinch likes him, so maybe he makes a case there. But of those three, he's the one I think you would possibly let go. I don't think you let go. I mean, like I said, you might trade Baddoo or Carpenter, I guess, if somebody gives you a good offer. But I don't think you let go of either of those guys. And it's possible both could start in Toledo. But like I said before, I think ideally the Tigers would like Baddoo to be their everyday left fielder and Carpenter to either kind of be a DH outfielder or be in AAA.
Yeah, I'd probably have to agree. Maybe you could try to trade Willie Castro to see if you can get anything for him. But yeah, I'm right with you, Chris. I would agree.
Uper?
Oh
yeah, definitely. I like Castro. I think he's exciting to watch. I have fun with him. He's been an exciting guy to have on these terrible baseball teams because he might make some mistakes, but he does some pretty cool things. So I'll miss him if he's gone. But if we're down to those three guys, then yeah, it's probably Willie Castro.
Raj?
Yeah, I can't really argue that. It's just sound logic. So I mean, I see Carpenter going down. So I think Carpenter, if Carpenter can hit left, or if Carpenter can really hit consistently on both sides of in terms of both left-handed and right-handed pitching, and can hit off-speed stuff, then we're in business. But I don't know. For now, I think he might start the year in minor league. So, but that's yeah. By the way, I want to give a really, I don't know if you guys saw that injury to the Dolphins. When you get a chance after the podcast, check that out. I'm not to deviate from that too much for the conversation, but
the quarterback Tua.
Yeah.
Tonight?
The Theismann?
It was not a Theismann, but just look at it from your own eyes. So
viewer discretion is advised.
Yeah, viewer discretion is advised.
Wait, is it one
happened tonight?
Yeah,
I do not like it. You got to warn me. Is it one where like his bone comes out of the leg? Because I don't.
No, nothing like that. It's just, it involves his head.
Oh,
he doesn't get decapitated or anything like that. It's just
because Tua, the Miami Dolphins said he has been taken to a local hospital for further evaluation. He is conscious in his movement and all of his extremities. So that's good, but also not a good sign.
Yes, it was a bad hit. All right, so
right,
yeah.
So
all right, what's the next question?
So the ones I saw this week, I got one from Deadly Ninja Bees, the three-parter, kind of 2 questions and 1 comment. It said, 1, can Kreidler hit well enough to be the utility guy next year? 2, who will be next year's Kerry Carpenter? And 3, I'm sick of forearm strains. So what do you guys think? Do you think Kreidler will hit enough next year to be a utility guy?
I think potentially he can. And I'm not going to mention it. Well, I got to mention it because I mentioned his hand many times. That busted hand could have lingered all year. So I'm interested to see what next year brings for him offensively. I think defensively, he's the real thing. I mean, he can play ball. He can play several positions. So if you're talking about a utility guy, that part of the job he'll get done.
Yeah, if he's playing in the outfield like you said today, Raj, I could definitely see it for sure.
I haven't seen enough in terms of hitting wise, but I mean, defensively speaking, he made a lot of plays shortstop today. He was very busy today. And so I would venture to say that if your Tigers are going to, it could be used potentially, I hate to say this, but maybe as a trade piece, only because of his value playing different positions, because it doesn't fit that Harrison. He doesn't walk either. So again, it really depends on how strict the philosophy they're going to go with that. So that's just my take on that. But
no, I think Kreidler is a better offensive player than we've seen. You know, it's obviously tough, to make the jump from AAA to the majors ever. He wasn't all that great AAA this year after the injury, like you said. I do think that I think he's more patient than his numbers indicate. I think he is a guy that with more time at the big league level would walk at least an average rate, like 8% rate. But yeah, he's not hitting. And as much as you want a utility guy to be capable of playing good defense all over the field, and I think Kreidler can. One of the earliest comps we ever made for him was Don Kelly. He's just kind of that big, long, lanky guy with kind of a flat plane swing. And he's a terrific defender on the left side. He's got a cannon arm. But for a utility guy, you also want somebody who can put in, like as a pinch hitter late in the game, right? That might get you a knock. And I don't see that with Kreidler right now. I'd like to see him get regular playing time next year rather than a utility guy. It's kind of early to be putting him in that role, and I think he just needs the at-bats against big league pitching. But, I also don't know if the Tigers want to have kind of an empty plate appearance there. I mean, they've done it this year with guys like Cope and Candelario, so what's the difference? But yeah, I don't know. I think eventually he may evolve into a utility guy, but probably not next year.
yeah, I mean, his ISO hasn't been above. I mean, he had a 200 ISO last year in AAA, and you have to see more power. I think you have to see more power to make yourself justified for that, at least to stick around in the major leagues, at least in my opinion. So
yeah. Yeah, he hit for a lot more power last year than he did this year. He was okay in AAA this year, but yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, I think there's more offensive potential, but it's tough to say right now that he's a utility guy. I think he needs more time. Now the second question was who's next year's Carpenter?
Ooh, this is an interesting one.
I mean, it's tough to if the question is who is the next year's guy who comes from like a late round pick and hits 30 home runs, and the answer is nobody because that never happened. But I don't know what. I guess you guys choose to how you want to answer that. Your own criteria.
Okay.
I'm gonna look. If you're gonna talk about who's gonna come out of nowhere and be a dude, quote unquote dude, I like using that term. Be a dude. Right. It's a tough question to answer because you look at the outfield right now in the minor leagues, and there's a couple guys out there like Andre Leon. But for example, like I'm looking at your list, Chris, that you made earlier, and I'm just like, wait, who is he? I don't. Who's he?
The foreign kids, like foreign rookie level.
But all jokes aside, I think a guy who can come out. Same thing with Gency DeLone. Like again, never. Some of these guys you're gonna get familiar with, but in all seriousness, I think a guy who may come out of nowhere in a system who could even get a possibility of getting a chance is somebody like Dane Myers. Like I think that Dane Myers made a case this year that he's intriguing enough, or they might just let him go. I don't really know. He can go either or, because sometimes defensively there's some very big lapses in defense in the outfield. First base not so much, but that's a guy who could come out of nowhere. And I mean that because no one's going to expect Myers, who's been in the system for a while, to come up and be a guy. I know the Tigers like him a lot, but again, we'll see. But I think that if anybody, as of right now, on the roster, because again, I expect even the minor league roster to be turned over quite a bit, except for the exception of a few folks. So if the case of right now, I think Dane Myers would be it.
I don't know. This one kind of stumped me, honestly, but one guy I was looking at was Daniel Cabrera, a 24-year-old. He was Tigers' competitive balance pick in 2020. Hasn't really lived up to expectations yet. So if he could be a guy that could finally break out next year, I don't know, Chris. I'm kind of interested what you have to say for this. I was a little bit stumped there. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, there are multiple ways to look at it. If you're asking me for somebody who goes ham and hits 30 home runs next year, I'd go with Isaac Pacheco. He's not coming from out of nowhere, right?
Oh, yeah.
A kid who hit 11, 12 home runs this year, 20 plus doubles as a 19-year-old in A-ball. He's got some hitting ability. He takes walks. He doesn't strike out a ton. He's enormous as it is, but when you see him up close, you can say he's like he could add 25 pounds of muscle to his upper body easily. Like, I don't know if he wants to, and wants to stay in the infield or whatever, but that's a dude who might go absolutely nuts next year and hit 25, 30 home runs. But again, that's not out of nowhere. It's just, he was a high draft pick. My kind of out of nowhere guy is Dom Johnson. And it's always kind of cheating to take a guy who was just drafted this year because people don't pay that much attention to like the complex league or in low A. But Dom Johnson was their 13th round pick out of Kansas State. And he just hasn't played a ton. He was at Oklahoma State and played in like 15 games. And I think he was a draft eligible sophomore. He had a solid Cape Cod league. Now, he's not a power hitter like Kerry Carpenter. Don't get me wrong there. He's a like 5'9", kind of fire hydrant type of guy, 5'9", 180 pounds. But he had a really good year for Kansas State. I want to say he posted an OPS over 1,000, and he did okay in like 15 games in the Florida State League this year. Hit a couple home runs. He hit a ball 108 miles per hour, hit a ball 420 feet, and he's also incredibly fast. He's probably already the fastest player in the Tiger system. You can't tell based on his stolen base numbers in college, but and I may have mentioned this before, but back in, I don't know, it would have been 2019, 2018 at the Perfect Game National event, he actually was faster than Enrique Bradfield. He ran a faster 60-yard dash, which it was like 6.2 seconds, which is and if people don't know who Enrique Bradfield is, he's a guy who went 46 for 46 in stolen bases this year for Vanderbilt. Considered, the premium speed guy in the draft next year. So Dom Johnson is really fast. He's got a little power. I suspect that he's going to struggle to hit a little bit, but he's a guy that I could see putting it together next year with the tools that he has and really coming out of nowhere to be like a top 30 prospect. That's not Kerry Carpenter, but that's the best I can do.
Well, I mean, does John Johnson have his stubs with him?
Well,
I mean,
remember,
did you guys not hear that? Go ahead.
I couldn't. No, I actually didn't hear it. I saw you were enjoying yourself, so I figured there's some music playing, but I couldn't hear it.
Yeah, what?
When I tweeted
Miami
out,
Vice, baby.
I think I tweeted out about his first home run from the minor league account, and it auto-corrected to Don Johnson.
Yeah, that's why I played it.
So, but yeah, I mean, that would be super fun. Like if he does turn into a prospect, think of all the fun we can have with memes.
Yeah,
He'd be in the bad guy at 10 Cup. He'd
Yeah.
be Nash Bridges. Dom Johnson is Smash Bridges, right? Like
or Knives
Well,
Out too.
he could be Crockett, and somebody else would be Tubbs. Somebody else got to be Tubbs from Miami Vice.
Yeah, there was he was kind of villain Knives Out in a way.
And which one?
Knives Out.
Oh, Knives Out. I forgot he was in Knives Out.
Yeah, he was the father.
He was in The Watchmen too.
Oh, the series I haven't watched that yet.
There's a couple. He was really close to being the Bruce Willis character in Die Hard.
Did he turn it? He turned it down, right? Because he wanted to.
I think he did.
Voice. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think a lot of
and he was
people turned
also
that
going to
down.
be the Harrison Ford guy in The Fugitive.
You turned that down too? I didn't know that.
I think so. But yeah, he could have had he had a great career as it is.
I mean, yeah, but still, I mean, one of those would have put him over the top because, wow, I know, yeah, a lot of people did reject Die Hard. Okay, we're getting
off topic.
No,
we're after the 90-minute point here where things get wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My two, real quick. I was gonna go with Dane Myers a little bit, and then I was, that's fine. I'll go a little bit further away from what I think is realistic. Gage Workman is the guy who, if he cuts the K rate, which is easier said than done, but if he could get that down even to 30% from 40%, the guy plays good defense. And again, I keep talking about, he cranked out well over 50 extra base hits in 130 games. That's not an easy thing to accomplish. So there's some raw power there. If the right coach gets his hands on him, maybe something good can happen. And then the other guy is a guy we don't talk enough about because he got hurt and we keep forgetting about him. Because I keep hearing, and Colt Keith. If Colt Keith gets to Erie next year and early in the summer, if he's hitting around 300 and he's showing enough power, why couldn't the tumblers fall in place to get him to the major leagues?
No, I mean, I'd say that it's tough because, for people who follow the minors this closely, it's hard to find somebody who's legitimately off the radar for us.
Yeah.
But like the average fan, I'm sure that Kerry Carpenter is like, who the hell is this guy? And that might be the case for Colt Keith. That might be the case for Danny Soretti, who, like, we've talked about him enough to be like, hey, this is interesting. But the average fan probably is like, what? Who's this? So, yeah, it's Colt Keith is a great one. I think Raj and I believe that Colt Keith is probably a top 100 prospect in baseball, if not the top player in the system. But I don't know. Hopefully, we'll get to see him play a little bit in AFL, or at least look at his numbers as he plays in the AFL.
I still think Colt Keith's top 3 prospect in the system. I will, and look, I would put him as a dark horse candidate for second base, but I mean, I put him just under number 5. We're talking about power rankings.
It's fun to imagine what kind of stats he would have put up over the course of the full season. When's the last time he played? His last game was in July. Let's see.
I was going to guess.
I was going to say late
June.
Yeah.
June 9th.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, he basically played about 8 weeks and had 9 home runs and was hitting 300.
I really think he would have. I think he would have ended up in Erie. I really believe he would end up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He may have ended up in Toledo if, like, the way. But that's a good one.
Yeah, I look, as far as Colt Keith's concerned, it's a hit. I mean, him and Isaac Pacheco. Imagine him and Isaac Pacheco in the same lineup too. Should have thought. I mean, Pacheco made himself into a dude this year too, and again, absolutely, forgetting the initials MM as in Marcelo Meyer, or at least for a minute, because everybody can shut up about that. Yeah. All right. Was there any other questions?
there was one more question I saw, and it was actually directed to me from Terry P. He said last show I said that Green's defense in center field was the worst in terms of making plays in. He said, I just wondered, how was Chet Lemons during his time? He was said to play a shallow center field. Did he get burned a lot over his head? Which is a good question. Unfortunately, we don't have that sort of directional data back from the 80s, right? That's a relatively new thing. I was referencing StatCast, which is in the last 4 or 5 years, they have the directional stuff. But, I remember Chet Lemon a little bit. I don't remember him really in his prime, but I looked up his defensive stats. And, he came to the Tigers in 82, and he finished 69th in 82 in terms of defensive runs saved. But then after that, in 83, he finished first. In 84, 5th, 85, 17th, in 86, 14th. All those were all plus years. He was one of the best defenders in baseball. Top 20 player. So I have a hard time believing that playing shallow cost him much in those years. But what's interesting
I have a lot of small sample recollections of wonderful catches with his back to the infield. I mean, the man could really go get it, and he had a lot of confidence when the ball was almost over his head. You felt good that he was going to track that down.
Yeah, I mean, what just based on the numbers, things seem to take a sharp turn in 1987, where he was 14 runs above defensive runs saved in 86. In 87, he was -1. In 88, he was -2. And in 89, he was -13. Finished 295th out of 298. So that to me says, like, hey, maybe he did play shallow. Maybe he lost a step or two. And suddenly the plays that he was tracking down and making these spectacular catches on were turning into doubles and triples. And that will screw you up pretty quickly. So, my best guess is it didn't hurt him early and it did hurt him late. But without, go ahead, Raj.
I was going to say he did have blood clot issues, so it could have been a result. I mean, that's why his numbers kind of dropped off. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was maybe towards the last couple of years, 88, 89. I believe it was.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I think in 88 when they were contending toward the end, didn't he miss some time even? He
struggled with some stuff that was going on. But I mean, if you want to, here's an example of some. I don't pardon the video quality here of the catches, but here's some Chet Lemon catches for you. Right there.
Nice.
That's a nice catch. This one's a really good one. Him running in.
I like it.
And then this one right here, behind his back facing the infield.
Oh, wow.
That's a nice catch. That is a nice catch. So, Metal Bug, by the way, Metal Bug 99 in YouTube says that Dylan Dingler will catch in 2024. That's his prediction.
So 2 years
Solid
now?
prediction. Yeah. Him or Josh Crouch. I think Josh Crouch has got a good case too. But yeah, as far as Chet Lemon goes, I really like that question because that was one of the best trades, underappreciated trades of all time. Steals. Because Steve Kemp did have a good season when he was here. He had a pretty good couple of years here in Detroit, right?
Steve Kemp was a nice hitter, and especially in those days when we cared about the baseball card stats, he was a quote-unquote RBI man, and that was a big trade. I mean, that was both teams giving up a cornerstone player. Chet Lemon for Steve Kemp was that was a knock your socks off thing when you read that in the newspaper the next day. Like, wow, we got Chet Lemon, but we gave up Steve Kemp. Oh my God. That would be akin to two big names getting traded for each other today. Like, I don't know, make something up. Mookie Betts for, not quite that hard, but two really, really established players getting traded for each other doesn't happen every day.
Yeah. And again, I think that if you look back on, I remember Kemp being like, there was a couple articles when I was looking up on newspaper.com, how upset he was. He was pretty pissed. He was very pissed about the trade, but it benefited for the Tigers. So was there anything else? Was that it, Chris?
No, that was it. But yeah, it's fun looking back. I'm looking at 82 to 87 for the outfielders in all of baseball. And Chet Lemon was 8th overall in WAR for outfielders that behind Dwight Evans, Tony Gwynn, Pedro Guerrero, Robin Young, Dale Murphy, Tim Raines, Ricky Anderson. He was ahead of Jesse Barfield and Andre Dawson. Like, yeah, I mean, he was a damn good player, probably underappreciated by traditional baseball card stats, like you said, but I think he'd be more appreciated in modern times.
Yeah, I mean, Chet Lemon, I think he has a academy down in Florida too. That he's been doing a baseball academy where he's got a lot of guys that come out of there that have been successful. So, but yeah, I know John's like, who's Chet Lemon, but one day,
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've never heard of him.
Yeah, you should look him up. Look up his stats. Look him up. This is why the injection of youth onto the podcast is essential.
We're gonna have a weekly segment. We're gonna give John an assignment to look up a player from the 70s and come back and give us a 2-minute synopsis on him.
I mean, you could get another example of how he does well here.
He was an overlooked, a great player for those Tigers teams. Like you'd probably name him like 6th if you were naming all the offensive players on those teams, right?
Sure.
Yeah, looks he had enough time to do this commercial. It's crazy. When I was making a catch, look at this.
Oh wow.
I love how they cut that in there. That's some great editing, honestly. But that was awesome. Yeah, like that was, that's some. All right, folks, we're out of here. So thank you so much for listening to the Woodward Tigers podcast. There'll be clips. By the way, one of the things that will be new coming next, actually as of Monday, will be featured on the main Woodward Sports channel. So expect some video. So expect video content from us once a week, as we'll keep you updated with the MLB postseason and the Tigers offseason moves. There'll be plenty. So we'll be more. We'll be out there more with video content. So looking back, maybe we'll do one on Chet Lemon. Some of those things that you and I discussed before, John, will be back in rotation. So a lot of content coming your way. So any suggestions that you want to see from us in the offseason, please let us know. And at Tiger Minor League Report, we are working on a tool series. We're going to redo the top 30. So that's coming. So plenty of content to keep you occupied, or you baseball fans out there, in the next few months or so. And you have anything in the hopper for MCB?
Yeah, I'm just writing an article right now. I'm about 2/3 done. Just talking about, with the Scott Harris hire, what are the odds of them? What's the path to putting a winning team on the field next year and not being a big rebuild season? What are the steps I think are going to be necessary to get that done?
Oh, yeah. Awesome. So we'll look forward to that. And there'll be, like I said, plenty of content available. There's going to be an article coming out tomorrow about the sweep of the Royals and ending the season on a high note. So 7-1 in the Scott Harris era. The Tigers avoid losing 100 games.
Let's go.
It's a celebration, bitches. I'm Rahel Castillo. Thank you so much for listening. Alongside me, Uper, Chris, and John. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a good night.
I had to use the ship.